The more I explore, the more I become fascinated by the richness of what we are actually here to experience on Earth. I started to become much more psychologically free, and I started to see those things that were holding me back and that were causing me pain as actually avenues for growth. Every time you were angry, there was also a you that's watching you be angry. All of those times you were ever angry, there was something stable and constant actually watching you. And the first spiritual awakening, though I'm hesitant to even use the words awakening because I'm far from any way awake, was to realize that broadening your identity to being more than just the psychological, that you're the awareness in which it's happening, is such a wonderful freedom. And may you have the grace to be able to see the challenges in your life as opportunities for you to become more and more free and recognize that this life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. Hello, welcome to the Humankinder podcast. I'm your host, Cian and this episode is actually just with me. This is an episode just for me to jump on and share with you who I am, why I'm doing this, and what you can expect. So I'm a psychotherapist, a psychologist, mainly organizational psychologist. For the last 10 years, I've been working in that space. And I have been fascinated with how can we help organizations, how can we help people to live better lives? How can we take all of the things from psychology and get them into the heads of ordinary people like you and me so that we can improve our experience here on this planet? And whilst I've been doing that work, I have become fascinated by this deep, rich inner world that we all inhabit. And I've been exploring this internal world for the last 10 years really intently. And the more I explore, the more I become fascinated by the richness of what we are actually here to experience on Earth. And I became interested in this for a number of reasons. Firstly, because both my parents are interested in this area. My dad is a leadership consultant, has had his own business making organizations more human, and is also a psychotherapist, as you would say, on the side, or uses these psychological ideas with people in organizations and coaches people, and has been obsessed himself with his own self-development journey. My mum is similar as a nurse and as someone who's been very interested in shamanic healing and Reiki healing and angel cards and these sorts of modalities. I grew up in this house where we were constantly talking about the inner world and relationships and what was going on inside people's heads, and that seeped into me a little bit. And then the second reason that I've become really interested in this is because of pain, because of suffering. I was a very curious child growing up and also a very sensitive child. And one of my earlier experiences was being so scared that something was going to happen to my parents, so anxious that I had to call them. They went on a date and I had to ring them half an hour, 45 minutes later and ask them where they were. And this sort of anxiety and tendency towards the world, like a very imaginative tendency towards the world, but also an anxious tendency towards the world, was something that has been one of my greatest teachers throughout my life. And so even as a young kid, recognizing that, why do I feel this way? Why am I struggling? So along all the great times and the great friendships and the wonderful childhood that I had, there was also these psychological challenges that stayed with me. And as I went into high school, this got exacerbated like it does for a lot of people. And I struggled from having loads of friends in primary school to struggling to make friends in secondary school, and then eventually working that out, and then into all these social battles that we get into in secondary school and figuring out who we are and finding out more about ourselves. And as I went through this experience, the anxiety that I had felt just continued to stay with me. And it really manifested itself in university and in that transition when I'd been sort of heavy when I was growing up and overweight, and I got a lot of ribbing for it. I got a lot of abuse for it and got teased. And I felt at that time in my heart and my soul, I said, if I could just get into good shape, if I could just get ripped, if I could just have the body that I always wanted, then everything would be okay. And so as I got into university, started to study psychology myself, mainly to figure out what was going on with me, I realized that what I was struggling with was a deep-rooted anxiety based on a lack of steady, stable self-worth. And this manifested itself in many different ways, in having a lot of eating disorder problems, body dysmorphia, where I got to the point where I had the body that I always wanted, and I realized that it wasn't enough. There was nothing that I could do. I just wanted more. I wanted to be leaner. I wanted to be fitter. I wanted to be bigger. And I was constantly comparing myself to other people. And if you put a camcorder inside my head, about 90% of it was all about how I looked. And it was just an avenue for my anxiety to actually come out and find its way. And so again, throughout all these wonderful experiences of university, of meeting people, of having the best time ever, of being free and finally being who you want to be more, these shadows kept following me. And as I left university and started to get into the working world, I started working with my father, Bart McEnroe, and a man called Joe Griffin, who originated this form of Human Givens psychotherapy. And it was actually in the Human Givens psychotherapy world that I started to learn tools that I could help myself more. So in learning how to help other people and learning how to do therapy, I found that, wow, there's so many things about my psychological world that need work. And you learn in psychotherapy, you start to learn that we're made up of these deep-rooted memories, these patterns that are buried in our nervous system. And they inform the survival parts of our brains, the more primitive parts of our brains. And it's actually those parts of our brains and our nervous system that's creating the reality that we're in. And so we learned lots of different tools for helping people to heal those. And I started to use those tools on myself more and more and more. And what started to happen was I started to become much more psychologically free. And I started to see those things that were holding me back and that were causing me pain as actually avenues for growth. And when I started to have those tools, it was incredible how difficult that was, but also the reward that came on the other side. And as I started to work more with people, and we would teach people in organizations about this work, and also about how to listen more productively, how to ask better questions, how to be the sort of leader that actually you wanted to show up for, and how that improved business results. As we started to teach all those things, I started to uncover this whole world of inner work. And it was actually through Joe's influence and through working with Bart as well, who was fascinated by this inner work, that I started to discover that the inner work keeps on going. It doesn't just stop at the psychological. When you get into this area of psychology, you learn that we have needs. And the basic premise is, the more I can get those needs met, the better I get those needs met. And the more I release the traumas that make it feel like I could never have enough of those needs, then the more psychologically healthy I am. The same way as if I get my physical needs met, I'm much more likely to be physically healthy. You start to realize that at a certain point, once you've got your psychological needs met to enough of a balance, that you objectively stand back and say, I should feel fantastic. There's something missing. And that then led me into the realm of spirituality, which is really about how are you going beyond your human self, beyond your psychological identity. And Joe, again, was a wonderful teacher in this. He was the first person to really get me onto this idea of my existence as a spiritual being outside just my human self. And he's wrote a number of brilliant books in this area. I would guarantee if you check them out, you would love them. And he started to introduce me to ideas like, well, is this need for, say, control or autonomy actually so solid like you feel like it is? Do we actually have any control at all? It's like, I feel on the human level that I need control, but do I actually need any control? And do I actually have any control over the things that are going on around me? And the spiritual started to challenge the psychological, and this conversation between spiritual and psychological started to challenge me to start letting go of more and more of the things that were holding me back. And as incredible as working with Bart and Joe was for my development, there was something stirring inside me on a soul level that just whispered to me, like, just let's go and explore, let's do something. And that for me came in the form of moving to Sydney. And I've been in Sydney now for the last 7 years. The first couple was just figuring out life. How do you get a visa? How do you get a job? Any of those things, working backpacker jobs and trying to establish yourself in a new country. And that was terrifying. It was very rewarding. It was very freeing. It challenged me so many ways psychologically. A simple example was living in Bondi with all these beautiful people, and here I am, like, obsessed with my body and obsessed with body image, and suddenly everyone I walk around is in top shape. If you've ever been to Bondi Beach, you'll know that, and they're extremely beautiful, and it's all about image. And that for me was about being tested, like, can you hold yourself in this environment? Can you let go of that in this environment? Right? Can you adapt to the busyness of Sydney and continue to grow and evolve? And through many ups and downs and trials and tribulations, that has been a huge part of my growth journey. And it's given me the confidence to be able to sit here today and actually go out forth with a podcast like this into the world. And a little bit more about the journey in Sydney has been getting back into the corporate world and starting to work with organizations and leaders in those organizations to help to really shift the consciousness there and to create organizations that are more psychologically safe, where organizations are putting people first and recognizing the more they invest in people and creating environments for people to be their best, the kinder, more human and high performing that they are, the better the organization goes. And so that's been a really enjoyable and also very frustrating journey to be involved in, to be wanting to share so much in an organizational context and seeing people show up and lots of people get so much out of it and other people not being reachable, and then working really hard to do a program and then having it cancelled or called off or minimized or people not working up. And it's just been an absolute journey. And so now starting to work more in this psychological and spiritual space, I'm excited to see what comes out. And as I got further and further into this path of spirituality, I started to realize that there is many, many levels. And I started to develop some skills that were beyond the psychological, like the skills of actually sitting in meditation and recognizing that although the psychological aspects of you come and they go, you are actually the awareness, the observer that's watching all of these psychological dramas unfold. Every time you were angry, there was also a you that's watching you be angry. All of those times you were ever angry, there was something stable and constant actually watching you. And the first spiritual awakening, though I'm hesitant to even use the words awakening because I'm far from any way awake, was to realize that broadening your identity to being more than just the psychological, but you're the awareness in which it's happening. It's such a wonderful freedom to recognize. And then, of course, when you're there, you think, wow, this is brilliant. I can be more accepting. I'm much more compassionate towards myself and the things that are coming up. But things start pulling you down again. And then the psychological work starts to become more real because you realize there's patterns that have been handed down to you by your parents or by society that are stopping you from remaining in that observer state. And whilst you're in that observer state too, you then start to notice that there are certain things that are holding you back, but there are also certain things that are pulling you forward. There are things and times when you feel much more expansive, where things feel lighter, where things feel more energetic. And through working with a friend of mine, Miles Trainer, in the soul alignment method, I started to get a method for uncovering those things that were actually what my soul, my unique awareness that's observing this particular human form, actually wants to embody in this lifetime. And so these sorts of spiritual inquiries and lessons have enhanced my life so much. I've also had a number of experiences, one of them with Sadhguru, who's an Indian mystic, when he came to Sydney, sitting in this hall, 7,000 of us, all sitting around waiting for Sadhguru to come out. And then he parted the curtain, came into the hall, and the entire room just burst. And I'm looking around myself and I'm looking at myself, and there are tears streaming down my cheeks, and I'm starting to feel all this bittersweet emotion, this sadness coming out of me and passing through me. And it's sadness for being in Sydney, where I live, away from my family. It's sadness for all of the things that have happened to me that I was never able to handle, or the love that I didn't get. And it's coming out of me because of the presence of this individual. And then it's being replaced by this incredible love, this love bursting from my chest area. And over the course of the day, he guided us on a number of different experiences that all culminated in this huge ecstasy, this bliss, this love, just right in the heart area here, just bursting out. And I'd never experienced something like that, independent of any stimulus, independent of any condition, just bursting from my chest. And so after that day, I knew that nobody could ever say to me that there was nothing real here, because I'd experienced something like a never-ending love that was inside of me, and I knew I had to get back there. And so over the last number of years, just really intensifying the spiritual journey and starting to purify myself in a number of different ways, letting go of traumas and starting to train higher states, training states like bliss, and realizing that those states are actually available here and now. And it's a choice, if we're able to make it, to enter those states and to stay there. And then if something starts to pull us down, then we start to let that go. And so these sorts of experiences have led me on the spiritual path to really recognize that we are a soul, a unique form of that higher spiritual essence here on this planet to express something, to learn certain lessons and to give certain gifts. And through working with Miles, realizing that those gifts that we have come from those lessons. And one of those gifts that I want to give to the world is this podcast, because it's something that I want to go on to heal all of the things that have happened to me and to share some of the things that really light me up. And I just feel like this is a medium that is drawing me to share. And this is an expression of what I'm here to do right now, because I know every time I'm having conversations with people, every time I'm editing, creating something, yes, it's hard, but also it's rewarding. It's expansive. It lights me up. It gets me to a completely different space. And over the last number of years of just learning to speak what was really true for me, I've really felt that dichotomy of what's really hard and difficult to say and difficult to let go of, making way for things that are beautiful and things that we're here to manifest in this lifetime. And so that's what this podcast is about. It's about exploring this entire realm of spirituality. It's about looking at the human side of things and the psychological and talking to people who are fascinated by that. Then it's looking at the soul level, like our awareness that's bigger than that human that's guiding us, that is us ultimately in this lifetime, and trying to navigate that and understanding, is there certain aspects of purpose that this soul is here to experience, and how can we connect more to that, and speaking to people who are working in that area. And then on the cosmic level, on the larger spiritual level of, if we're all one consciousness here experiencing itself, what is going on in this reality? What is happening here? The mysteries of life. I am fascinated by the mystical traditions. I'm fascinated by psychological insights, insights through psychedelics, insights through physicists coming up with insights through science about the way that our reality is structured that echoes what mystics have been saying for thousands of years. This whole area is something that I just think is the literal coolest thing in the world. And I am fascinated by it, and I can never get my full fill of actually talking about it. And so if you would join me on this podcast, that's what we're going to explore. We'll talk to people who are practitioners in that space, people who are students, people who are researchers, teachers, anyone who's interested in bringing a unique angle on this space will sit here with me and we'll discuss it. And I want to make it really practical too. So I'll be asking guests to clip in practical exercises that we can use, meditations, things that we can take away, because it's through taking these spiritual ideas and through testing them, experimenting with them in your own life, that you can really see, is this true for me? Does it actually work for me? Does it improve my experience? Am I freer, more joyful, happier, better in my relationships? And ultimately, it's you that is the one who is guiding yourself through this experience. And you're here to experience whatever you're here to experience. And so take what is useful and leave the rest, and test everything that you hear on this podcast. And we'll be going live on YouTube, we'll be going on Spotify, we'll be going on Apple Podcasts. And if you are watching this, then that means I've actually figured out how to do all those things. And it has been successfully uploaded. So celebrating that, my hopes and dreams for this podcast is that first and foremost, it's a place that we can all together explore what's possible for this human experience. Just how good can it get? How good could it be? And that this becomes a medium for my own awakening, my own learning, and for yours too. And may you have the grace to be able to see the challenges in your life as opportunities for you to become more and more free, and recognize that this life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And that all of us have this opportunity to grow and expand and to be the best version of ourselves. And what this podcast is here to show is that there's so much to that rich journey and to that rich universe that really is an antidote to a lot of the nihilism and the meaninglessness that we see in the society around us. And if we are going to make a beautiful society, and if we are going to create a world that your children would actually want to live in, then this expansion in consciousness and this dreaming in of a new world is exactly how it's going to happen. So thank you for joining me and my small contribution to that. And I hope to see you in many more episodes.